Well, this is a waste of time.
I have conquered self-doubt and seized personal growth!
I'm listening.
Welcome, friends, new and old. We're back this week discussing Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4, Episode 7. This one's entitled A Few Badgeys More. Now, there will be spoilers ahead, so this is your last chance to duck out if those aren't for you. Consider yourself warned. On with the show. So as I just mentioned, A Few Badgeys More is the title of this episode, and I think that has a little bit of cultural reference not only to Star Trek past, but just pop culture and movies in general. This is definitely a play on and a continuation or an homage to the old Star Trek TNG episode, A Fistful of Datas, which was in and of itself a reference or a homage to the Fistful of Dollars and A Few Dollars More old Clint Eastwood Western movies. So that doesn't necessarily play into the storyline here, but I do think that this episode does hold a lot of similarities and callbacks to that TNG episode where, if you don't recall, was Data being plugged into the computer for some sort of maintenance or system updates or something. I can't recall off the top of my head, but something goes awry. Worf and Alexander are on the holodeck, and by the way, this may be my favorite and personal best Alexander episode overall, but that's not a high bar, so things go wrong. Data becomes the avatar or the visage of all the villains on the holodeck, and Worf has to conquer them all using his wits and his skills and all that. Good episode. Fun, lighthearted holodeck episode. But what happens here? Well, as you could probably tell, Badgey comes back. He's salvaged by the Druk Mani from that season 1 finale, I think it was. I can't recall exactly, where Rutherford got the visor ripped off and Badgey was kind of floating through space. So he's now returned to us. He is villainous as ever. He is trying to get revenge, and he ends up taking over the Druk Mani ship, which I thought was a nice touch. I really liked that. He was kind of quasi-assimilating these people. A little bit more on that later because of another group of characters we see in this episode. But Badgey actually isn't the only one returning. We get a trio of computerized villains from Lower Decks history who return in this episode. Badgey ends up kind of going through this character arc of the episode. Every time there's a little bit of a turnabout or things get twisted on their head, Badgey ends up splitting off a dual personality to create a new form of Badgey. So when Rutherford and Mariner come over to the ship to kind of try to talk reason, and Rutherford tries to take Badgey under his wing and bring him into the fold and treat him like the family, like the son he never did before, Badgey kind of splits off, and we get Badgey and we get Goodgey. And I know that's kind of on the nose, but whatever, it worked for the show. And then later on, they try to talk Badgey out of this infinite destruction thing by appealing to the logic of the situation. So then we get a third spin-off where we get a Logic-y, which is, again, even more on the nose, but you know what? I don't fault it, whatever. This is what Lower Decks does. I liked the Badgey story arc. I liked where things go, the evolution of the episode. I liked the character relationships. This is probably the biggest character episode we've received for Rutherford this season. I guess you could count last episode where he and Tendi had that little romantic thing, but that was more of a them as a couple development. This is more him in and of himself in relationship to characters around him, and I know that was just a very convoluted way of saying Rutherford developed a little bit in this episode or had the most development. We've had a lot of great character work and growth and depth and evolution for all of our other Lower Deckers, including T'Lyn, who is actually a brand new character this season. Well, brand new as far as a focus character, and even she has had great development. Rutherford has been pretty left behind outside of kind of his ancillary connection with other characters, so I'm glad we got the last 2 episodes where we sort of kind of deal with it, but I'm really hoping we get a just meaty dig into Rutherford within the next couple of episodes. Setting that story aside, we'll come back to it in a little bit. We also got some more growth, as I mentioned, with another race of characters that have been long absent from Star Trek. The Binars. And these are a fascinating kind of group of aliens. They have the technology implanted in their brains. They have this dual personality. Well, not really a personality, but there's 2 of them always connected in sequence. And it's very, very artificially intelligent and artificially escalated, and they're all connected through a technological mainframe. I liked that, but it feels like once the Borg came into the picture in TNG and then all the subsequent Star Trek series, the Binars were kind of left on the wayside, and I think part of it's just because of how much they would have to deal with the fact that this group is kind of leading up to what the Borg become, and there would be some racism or something there, which could potentially make for a nice storyline, so maybe we'll see that in the future. And I definitely think this is a great renaissance time to bring back a lot of these long-lost Star Trek species that didn't get much play, because there's not a lot more you could add to the layers of the Romulans and the Klingons and all of these species we've spent so much time with without kind of, digging into things we already know. These are characters, these are aliens that we could just basically implement whatever we want to with. So you bring back a character like this, the Bynars, you bring back the Orions in every few years and keep adding a little more to them. Heck, bring back the Tholians. You've got a lot to do with them. And Strange New Worlds brought back the Gorn. I know a lot of people aren't enjoying what they're doing with them. But again, I'm getting off in the weeds right now because the main reason I bring up the Bynars at all is because they were the group, the species, the ship that was attacked and taken out by the mysterious ship in this episode. However, we do get to learn a lot more about what's actually going on, and it actually ties into the main plot in an even bigger way than it has in prior episodes. What we learn at the end of the episode through one of our other returning computerized threats, Agamis, is that the ships are not being destroyed, they are in fact being captured.
Whoa, all those ships, they aren't being destroyed. They're being stolen.
It's all fake?
Now, I've postulated pretty much from the beginning that the ships were being destroyed, but the alien life forms within the ships are being collected. It seems that the ships themselves, with all crew on board, are all being collected. Why are these ships being collected? Is it some sort of revenge plot from someone like, the alternate Bradward Boimler? Could it be revenge from another race we've met in this show so far? Could it be something similar to that Futurama episode where this vast entity from space went around collecting various life forms?
I shall preserve the DNA of Homo sapiens.
I thought you only saved the DNA of endangered species.
Farewell.
I guess he didn't hear me.
Could it be something like that? Or is it definitely a more mundane case of some pirates behind the scenes trying to play a trick on the Federation? This season of Lower Decks so far has just evolved the series so much that it feels like we are no longer in that first season where everything was just kind of a joke. Sure, there's a lot of that in the background, but I would be very disappointed if the end of the season comes and it's just a punchline and there's no real stakes or consequences. So that's why I'm hoping there's actually this grand plot that's going to be revealed soon.
Do you guys want to take a root beer float break?
Yeah, of course we do.
Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
Now, the other main point of this storyline, as I mentioned, Agamis comes back and Peanut Hamper come back. Last we saw them, they were imprisoned in Daystrom. They are still there, although Peanut Hamper gets out on parole. Agamis tricks his way out, and I do like how this is played up with Boimler and Tendi, as they were captured by Agamis during his escape, but they weren't really captured. They could have gotten out of it anytime they wanted to. So this was a nice moment, a character moment, to see not only our two characters having grown in their Starfleet duties, their abilities, and their confidence, but it was a nice way to see Agamis kind of revealing his plots and being overly confident with his plans. I don't know if I ever really connected enough with the emotional implications of the Peanut Hamper-Agamis relationship, especially since we've seen Peanut Hamper before, and every time she gets into a relationship, she sabotages it and she's just this terrible person. So I never really felt like she was being genuine. Agamis potentially was, and I did really like the characterization here, but I mean, there's really no way to dislike a Jeffrey Combs character. I had potentially postulated earlier that Agamis and Peanut Hamper could theoretically be behind this ship, and this episode definitely seems to imply they have nothing to do with it. They have no connection to it. However, they could have dropped this episode here as a bit of a red herring to show us it's not them. Pull back the curtain, it's definitely not them, only to throw us a curveball in the last episode and show us that behind the scenes the machinations have been going on so long that it really was them the whole time, but I don't feel like that's where they're going. Badgey has ascended beyond us.
Well, I'm gonna go to an empty dimension and create a universe now.
He has gone off to his own dimension to create life from scratch there, which is very Dr. Manhattan and Doomsday Clock, I guess, and it's very reminiscent of that Justice League Unlimited episode with Robert Picardo. So I definitely kind of liked that little storyline with Badgey. Wasn't anything I would have anticipated. It wasn't something I thought was going to be done, but I really did enjoy that. And we are left with, at the end of this episode, Guji being an AI assisting our Cerritos crew. I don't know if he's going to become a main character going forward. Will we just get random references here and there, or will it just be kind of dropped? I don't know, but there are definitely interesting implications for that. And the third incarnation of this split personality of Badgey was Logicy, who seemingly died. Now granted, I really like Jack McBrayer's take on Badgey here, and even as Goodgie, I didn't really buy the Logicy voice. I think they were going for a Vulcan-esque type of speech pattern, and it just didn't sound natural to me, so maybe Logicy isn't coming back. One thing I haven't touched on, which was incredibly vital to this episode, are grapplers.
Skip that part, they don't care.
Hey, grapplers aren't stupid.
Gotta agree with Boymes. Grapplers are sick.
I love grapplers.
I didn't know they had grappler arms.
This guy was distracted by the grapplers.
Overall, I just really liked what this episode did. It had great character development, it had great plot development, it had great revelations for the ongoing mystery, and it dealt with all of our characters in realistic and fun ways, even though it didn't necessarily dig in as deeply as some of my favorite episodes of this season, like the one where we got growth with T'Lyn. It definitely all came together to feel like a well-oiled machine, especially in the Lower Decks universe, which can be very zany sometimes. It felt almost like a grounded storyline that really made sense. But what did you think of this episode? Leave all your thoughts below, like, share, subscribe, do all those YouTube things. Justice for Prodigy has been served, and until next time...
Yeah, so I'm gonna leave.
Yeah, let's get out of here.